Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Kristie Ortiz, and I am the Director of the Preserving Affordable Housing Program at Brooklyn Legal Services Corporation A. For those of you who would like Spanish interpretation, Carla will explain how to listen to the program in Spanish.
Buenas tardes. Habla el intérprete asignado para esta sesión. Si tuvieran alguna necesidad de conectarse en español o escuchar esta sesión en español, por favor, pongan la opción que aparecerá en su pantalla de optar por escuchar la traducción en español. Y con eso podrán escuchar toda la sesión en español que estaré yo interpretando en vivo. I just told those who will need a Spanish interpretation to see the option in the bottom of the screen, to switch to Spanish to listen the whole session in Spanish as I interpret it live.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So tonight we will be presenting the new reality for renters after COVID. It's been a confusing couple of years since the pandemic started, and housing policies in the cities have changed dramatically. Tonight's program will clear up the myths you might be hearing and explain the actual housing policies currently in place. I just want to make sure you will, okay. So we have a jam-packed program tonight, and we are so happy to be co-hosting this event with many of our closest partners. With Brooklyn A tonight is Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation, Catholic Charities Neighborhood Services, Inc., Good Shepherd Services, Canva, Inc., United Community Center, Metro Plus Health, and University Settlement. Staff members from most of these groups will be speaking tonight, so I'll let them introduce their organization when they have the floor, and contact information for each will be listed at the end of the presentation. We will also have a Q&A session at the end of the program, so please hold your questions until the end. Before we jump in, I want to thank the elected officials sponsoring the event tonight. Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez, Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, Councilmember Sandy Nurse, Councilmember Charles Barron. We are incredibly honored to have you in your office joining us tonight, and I thank you for your consistent support and partnership in serving New Yorkers. And now I would like to welcome and hand the mic over to Assemblywoman Latrice Walker.
So thank you so much for having me. I am Assemblymember Latrice Walker, and I represent New York State's 55th Assembly District, which includes the communities of Brownsville, Ocean Hill, Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights, East Flatbush, and Cypress Hills. And really want to just say thank you to Brooklyn Legal Services Corp A for inviting me. We've been partners for a long time, including opportunities where you had a drop-down office in my office in order to handle and address a number of the issues and the concerns that my constituents had with respect to their housing concerns, up to and including facing evictions. I also am on the road as we are coming down from budget negotiations for this New York State's budget. It is presently 26 days past due. And as many of you know, I have been on a hunger strike. This is day 19. I did 19 days last year. We are still experiencing a number of victories with respect to issues regarding criminal justice and housing and other things, healthcare, fair pay in our budget. And I want to commend my colleagues as well for holding the line and really the support that we've been given by a number of community-based organizations, including those which you have listed this evening. So as you may have heard, at one point in time, 421A was back on the agenda in terms of one of the budgetary items that we were looking at. But questions of affordability just went unanswered. And because there was still too much for us to address in such a short amount of time, it's no longer on the issue, but instead we have an opportunity now in order to speak to people who have housing fair housing, affordable housing, accessible housing to New Yorkers as their baseline issues to be a part of this very important conversation. And the overall achieving goal for us here is to ensure that our families, our communities, our neighbors, and our friends are not being evicted from the housing security that they enjoy. And so we are also watching as escalating rents are still plaguing us. Income instability is a huge issue. And at the same time, we also seen that we have ended the eviction moratorium. And the courts are open and evictions are being processed fast and furiously. But of course, we have dedicated attorneys and advocates just like you who are holding the front line on behalf of so many New Yorkers. Of course, I want to, give a big shout out to my colleagues in the New York State Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus who have been attacking these issues on many fronts and holding together as a group in order to fight off a lot of the changes, which we know would have a negative impact on our constituents. We've helped to secure over $100 million in these last two budgets to fund the conversion of distressed hotels and commercial properties, and to create additional supportive and affordable housing. When I got elected, I was told that 25,000 people were returning from the upstate criminal justice system to my district. And so reentry housing was also a huge item of import for us. And we broke ground this last summer on the Rise, which is a development that we'll be working with the Fortune Society on, as well as the Osborne Association and a number of other groups, in order to provide housing to people who our laws are discriminating against by keeping out of the housing stock. We're also fighting to fund the Housing Access Voucher Program, which will provide a rental voucher to New Yorkers who are homeless and at risk of losing their homes. It's very similar to the Section 8. The HAVP program would require recipients to pay 30% of their income towards rent, with the remaining costs being covered by these vouchers. It would provide critical assistance to families who are unable to enroll in Section 8 due to many issues of capacity, including that of their immigration status. I represent over 29 NYCHA developments, and NYCHA presents a unique problem with respect to representation as it relates to evictions. We're also looking at redoing the sort of housing court that we know that there are not a lot of legal protections that are provided to many of the residents there. And we know that tens of thousands of NYCHA residents have been struggling to pay their rent since the beginning of the pandemic, and residents of public housing has racked up over $466 million in rental arrears since COVID-19 hit New York and the country and the world. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP, doled out more than $3 billion to keep tenants in their homes across the state. The money has only gone to private landlords while providing zero relief for tenants of public housing, zero relief, and that is just unacceptable. Both the state Senate and the Assembly has included over $385 million in our one-house budgets to get ERAP money to people who live in public housing. Governor Hochul didn't propose any money for ERAP, so the legislative leaders are fighting as we speak, even though ERAP has been taken off the table. So again, I am glad to be able to partner with you. I look forward to listening in and hearing from all of our partners here. We know that housing is a human right, and everyone has a right to safe, decent, and affordable housing. And so we'll keep hope alive and we'll keep the pressure on. And thank you so much again for having me. I am Assemblymember Latrice Walker.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman. I would like now to give the floor to Evelyn Cruz from Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez office.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to join you tonight. I have the Congresswoman's photo up. I'll be up soon. But good afternoon. Congresswoman Velasquez is in Washington, D.C. as the House is in session. As you know, we have a new speaker in the House and a new majority, and many who have many different ideas about how to allocate resources or the role of government in providing affordable housing and social services, to mention a few issues that concern the member. The Congresswoman extends her gratitude to Brooklyn Legal Services Corp. A for their immeasurable and tireless commitment to serving the legal needs of our community here in North Brooklyn, Central Brooklyn, and East New York. The work that they do is invaluable and helps us ensure that all individuals, low-income individuals, and most of our vulnerable have access to legal representation and justice. As we know, legal services can be expensive and inaccessible for those who need it the most. Fortunately, BKA services provide free legal assistance, and that is something that we appreciate, that we value, and that we fund at a national level. The Congresswoman also extends greetings to her colleagues in local government. She values her partnership with our city council members and the assembly member in the fight for equity and social justice here in the trenches. As we know, the COVID pandemic has caused unprecedented challenges and disruptions in our daily lives, especially impacting our housing system. Early in the pandemic, the federal government recognized that the crisis will disproportionately impact the financial status of renters, of which half of all renters across the nation suffered major loss of income. In New York, those losses were largely among renter households led by people of color, those with low incomes, and younger people and single parents. Through no fault of their own, these individuals and families were suddenly forced to choose between paying their rent or paying for basic necessities such as food, medicine, and even childcare. With many individuals and families experiencing job losses and housing becoming, increasingly difficult, the pandemic highlighted the urgent need for affordable housing, legal services, and rental assistance payments for tenants who have been struggling to make ends meet. The amount of money allocated through the Emergency Rental Assistance, the federal ERAP program, during the pandemic varied depending on the level of government. Congress provided a total of $46 billion in rental assistance to New York through two major programs, the ERAP program and the Coronavirus Relief Fund, as part of the COVID-19 relief packages passed in 2020 and 2021. The ERAP program, which is administered by the U.S. Department of Treasury, received $25 billion in rental assistance and an additional $21.6 billion in rental assistance from the American Rescue Plan. It is important to know that these funds were distributed to the states and local governments to administer their own rental assistance program. And you know that it went to like the OTDA program at the state level. Through two separate disbursements, New York State received more than $2.29 billion that went into the ERA program, which was essential to preventing mass rental evictions throughout the state. In October of 2022, New York State's Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the ERA program, received another tranche of funding. It was $99.4 million from the U.S. Treasury officials. These recent payout to New York State was one of the third times the state received such a large amount of federal dollars, but unfortunately did not meet all the needs, right? And unfortunately, a large chunk of this money remains at the New York State level. Unfortunately, public housing residents and Section 8 residents were deprioritized in terms of how they rated tiers. And it has been devastating for tens of thousands of public housing residents who are now facing potential eviction and rent arrears. In some cases, these, they're faced with the prospect of real eviction, if not for legal services. Early this year, the state received an additional $63 million in rent relief funds. And the Congresswoman, as the ranking chair of small business and as the most senior member on the Public Housing Committee, she penned a letter along with colleagues urging the governor, the executive branch, to allocate to ensure that they are able in this budget to add EVAP funding to assist our tenants, our community. And this is something that we're hoping that the executive office and the legislature will be able to do in this budget. It is critical, a life-saving for our seniors, for those that are disabled, and again, tenants who are in renter years. The Congresswoman has also been instrumental in fighting for affordable housing here in our district. She has introduced numerous bills like the Landlord Accountability Act, which provides protection to tenants living in federally assisted housing to ensure that landlords do not violate their housing rights. She also introduced the Public Housing Emergency Response Act, another bill to get NYCHA, Public Housing Capital Fund. The other bill that was critical and we have reintroduced is the Eviction Prevention Act. This bill authorizes the Department of Justice to provide grants to state and local governments to make legal counsel available to eligible tenants undergoing eviction. Any eligible tenant or individual whose income is less than 125% would be eligible for assistance. We've also supported Tenement Empowerment Act. We're also working with our city council people on the anti-warehousing bill. Of course, there are a series of housing structures that are in place that unfortunately are not favorable to our residents. And the Congresswoman, again, will continue to advocate for those services and work with all of you to ensure the safety and to ensure that our constituents have safe, affordable, and decent housing. So I will stay on the, on the call to listen, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome Councilmember Charles Barron.
Thank you very much. And to all of you who are in attendance, I thank you for having this kind of vital, critical forum on affordable housing. Honesty compels me to say that our Black and Latino elected officials are simply not doing enough. When we hear these big numbers, 300 and some odd million from the state for ERAP, well, that's out of a $227 billion budget. And the need is far greater than what the allocation is in these budgets. And while it's just kind of a struggle on a state level, when I was up there in the state assembly, they did 2 point some odd billion, but the need was even greater than that. So we have to begin to demand that the allocations and the budgets meet the needs of what the problem really is. Secondly, in the city council, it's even worse because we are the majority. People of color are the majority, women are the majority, and it's a $106.7 billion budget. And when we look at that budget and see that it woefully inadequately has funding in there for rental assistance, for anti-poverty, and for workforce development programs, we have to get the area median income in our neighborhoods up. In many of our neighborhoods, the area median income in mine is $36,000 for a family of 3. In others, it's even a little bit higher, maybe even lower. So no matter what the rent is, if you don't get the income up, it's going to be a real problem when we're going to need this rental assistance forever. Lastly, when we look at affordable housing, we have to say affordable to who? How are we defining affordable housing? And in many of our districts, I'm proud to say that in East New York, we're not gentrified, at least in not my portion of the East New York, the 42nd Council District and the 60th Assembly District that my wife and I was in seats for the last 20 years. We're not gentrified. We don't have market housing because we had the power and we used it to keep out market rate housing and to have it. So since you got our income so low, we're going to have the rent low. So our income is low. Well, if you want to get a studio apartment, it's going to be $500 a month, not $2,500 a month. And you want a 1-bedroom apartment, it's going to be $700, $800 a month. A 2-bedroom, $900 a month. A 3-bedroom, $1,100 a month. So we're going to keep the income or the rents commensurate with the income. But I'm just at my wit's end, why in this city where we have, in this state, the head of the assembly is Black. The head of the Senate is Black. The Attorney General is Black. The mayor, well, he's Black. The Speaker of the City Council is Black. The police commissioner is Black. The school chancellor is Black. The public advocate is Black. DAs, Blacks and Latinos. Borough presidents, Blacks and Latinos. Head of the most powerful unions, Blacks and Latinos. Come on now. With all of those positions of power, how does that translate to dealing with a $227 billion budget and a $106 billion city budget? And that's just the expense budget. The city's capital budget is $164 billion for the next 10 years. We have to get more for our people during these budget negotiation processes, and we have to get the city council members, since the city council has the power to determine what's going to be built on city-owned land, to not vote for projects that have 24.5% affordability and say, well, hey, it's the most I could do, and 80 to 75% market. This is what's plaguing our communities. And I'm going to continue to fight for the caucuses, the Progressive Caucus, Black, Latino, Asian Caucus, and the City Council to use their power to determine, to let this Mayor Cop Adams know that this budget is not going to be a Republican austerity budget, but a progressive people's budget. And these are the things that we have to fight for. It's in our hands, as Adam Clayton Powell said, use what's in your hands. We have the power in our hands to stop this madness, and we cannot go for a bunch of pieces of legislation that everybody will put forward. But when it comes to the budget, and when it comes to the allocation of affordable housing and those development projects, they should go to community land trust. The community land trust should receive the land for $1, just like some of these rich white male developers got, and develop these things for our people. So I do have 3 or 4 meetings tonight, but I just wanted to come on and say thank you, Brooklyn Legal Services, for the work that you've done, and we will continue to be supportive of you.
Thank you. Thank you all again for being here and for sponsoring tonight's events. Now to kick off our program, a reminder that we'll have a Q&A at the end, but you can put your questions in the chat. And we will be posting on the Brooklyn A YouTube channel in case you missed anything. With that, I'll hand it over to Aleicia Hutchinson from Good Shepherd Services.
Hello, everyone. I will be presenting on ERAP and on the one-shot deal. Before I begin, I do want to say that for ERAP, the information is as it stands today. It could change in the future, but I will be presenting on what are the regulations for today, as of today for ERAP. So the myth is I do not need to pay rent because ERAP will pay it all and stop me from being evicted. Unfortunately, as of right now, that is not true. The ERAP application portal closed on January 20th of 2023. The program was paying 12 months of back rent and 3 months of future rent. If you have not filled out an application and submitted your documents as of now, there is no way to submit a new application. And applications, as was previously discussed, for Section 8 and public housing have not been paid as of yet and are still pending in the ERAP portal. The next myth, can we go to the next slide? Sorry about that. The next myth is HRA will not seek repayment of a one-shot deal. And that is also a myth. The reality is that one-shot deal program is a loan program provided by HRA. Although they they do have the right to seek repayment. The only people that qualify, that they do not seek repayment are recipients of SSI. For any other tenant, they do have the right to seek repayment. HRA will not add the debt to your credit report, and if you win a lottery or a lawsuit against New York City, HRA will get reimbursed before you receive those funds. And next up is Nicole from Catholic Charities.
Thanks, Aleicia. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Nicole Grzesiuk. I'm a supervisor with the Catholic Charities home-based program. And so I'm just going to be speaking quickly a little bit about different subsidies. So there's always a lot of questions about subsidies and how the city, state, and federal are able to help out paying the rent on a month-to-month basis. So the first myth is I didn't lose income due to the pandemic, but I live in public housing, aka NYCHA, or I get another subsidy like Section 8, City FAPS, or FEPS, but there might be a program that will help me pay back any rent that I owe. So right now, the only government program that might be able to help out paying any back rent or arrears for someone who lives in New York City would be that one-shot deal that Aleicia spoke about. So the one-shot deal is set up by the New York City HRA, Human Resources Administration. They are really the only entity that is helping out paying back rent. Sometimes people are able to apply with local charities, such as Homebase or other programs in their local community. But a lot of times too, the charities require people to go to HRA first for the one-shot deal before they're even able to assist. So it's sort of confusing because to apply for the one-shot deal, they don't necessarily say what the eligibility criteria is. It's a lot of just apply and we'll let you know. It's on a case-by-case basis. And so someone you know or a neighbor might have applied and gotten money when you didn't. And so usually there needs to be a reason as to why the tenant would stop paying their rent, either loss of job, cut hours, some sort of medical emergency. And they also have to show how they can keep paying the rent going forward, which is usually a problem because, as many people will speak about on the panel tonight, a lot of people don't make enough to cover their rent on a monthly basis. So applications that for tenants that have subsidies to ERAP aren't able to be paid and will most likely not be paid because the program is running out of money. So the next slide, please. So the next myth is I don't need to work to pay rent because there is a program that will help me. So ideally, this would be great if there were enough programs that could assist everybody and pay. But unfortunately, the money and resources are just not here at this time. So for a lot of tenants that want to be able to keep the apartment, they need to have an income source that can cover their rent on an ongoing basis. So that's going to be either from employment or SSI or some other income stream that's going to be able to cover their rent. If they don't have that, they need to be able to apply for a subsidy to help out to cover that remaining portion. So Section 8 is pretty much the one that a lot of people have heard of, as well as City FAPS, which is through the city, and FEPS, which is through New York State. And public housing can change the tenant's rent amount depending on their income. So it's all calculated depending on how much the tenant has coming in on an annual basis. But unfortunately, they are very hard to come by. Section 8 and as well as NYCHA have years-long wait lists. Section 8 was able to open up as sort of COVID branch over the last couple of years, but that again has almost months-long wait lists right now. And so really the only other subsidies that a tenant can apply for are city FEPs and FEPs, which have, again, very strict eligibility that a vast percentage of people that need it aren't necessarily able to qualify for. And these applications also take a long time to process. So if someone really is in a dire situation, sometimes it's really hard to be able to keep them in their apartment because of the eligibility criteria and the amount of time it takes. I can go to the next slide. And so the last myth for me is because I owe a lot of rent and I have no income, there's a subsidy that I am eligible for. So from what I was saying before, that sounds like if you owe a lot of rent, you have no way to pay your rent. It seems like a perfect match that you would be eligible for a subsidy. But like I said, again, those are the FEPs and city FEPs subsidy programs have very strict eligibility requirements. So those are the two subsidy programs that we generally screen for at Homebase. And so those are available to help any low income New York City tenants. But you have to be living in the community. You can't be living in the shelter, as well as meet all that other eligibility criteria. So if you already have arrears, sometimes FEPs can cover up to $20,000 or more, depending on the situation. And city FEPs doesn't say the max arrears that it can cover. So usually, again, it's like a case-by-case basis. We try to screen and see what everyone's individual information is. And so city FEPs and FEPs are different because of their funding sources. So FEPs is through the state, and it's the only subsidy that is for like a specific family group. So FEPs is for families. So it's families that are on cash assistance, like public assistance, PA cash, and also have a kid that is under 18, or if they're 19 and in high school, or someone who's pregnant in the household, excuse me, and are facing eviction. So that is within the housing court system, or if they're homeless in the city shelter system and their shelter worker is able to work with them to move them into the community with this subsidy that'll keep paying their rent going forward on a month-to-month basis. So City FEPs is a larger program that's funded through the city, that if you guys are at all familiar with the old Link programs that had Link, I believe 1 through 7, and then City FEPs, and they finally combined it all into one to make it a little easier for us. And so City FEPs is for homeless individuals or families. So it doesn't have to be families with children. It can be for single adults or an adult family, an adult couple, as long as they meet the eligibility requirements. So it is somebody who has to be one of these 4 categories. So someone who's formerly homeless and stayed in a city shelter, is a military veteran, or someone who has an active APS, Adult Protective Services case, or lives in a rent-controlled apartment. So it's not necessarily just category 1 is really the biggest one, that I used to live in the shelter and now I automatically qualify for City FEPs. Unfortunately, there are a lot of other criteria, most of which the biggest hurdle is that housing court. There needs to be some sort of risk for eviction that's not just necessarily the landlord saying, I want you out, someone being doubled up with a family member and wanting their own apartment. There needs to be some sort of housing risk. And that's really our hardest hurdle for people to have in order to get this subsidy. And I think that's my last one. If you want to go to the next slide. And I'm sure there are questions, and I will stick around at the end for more. And right now I'm going to pass it along to Kayan Chiu from University Settlement.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kayan Chiu. I'm from University Settlement. We're a multi-service organization, and my program, Project Home, specifically work with tenants who are facing eviction or have issues with their landlord. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about rental arrears and getting one-shot deal. So the myth that I have is I can keep applying for one-shot deals when I fall behind, and there is no limit to how much rental assistance I can receive. So next slide, please. So as the name suggests, one-shot deal is generally a subsidy that helps you get back on your feet because of, for whatever reason you fell behind on rent. Although HRA does not have a hard and fast rule about how many times you can apply for one-shot deal, through our experiences, our collective experience, that HRA may not approve multiple applications submitted within a calendar year. Although, in other words, HRA will not approve if you show a pattern of recurring needs. However, HRA will approve multiple one-shot deal if it's submitted over the span of a 10 years long tenancy. So for example, if you lived in an apartment for 10 years and you apply 5 years ago and you apply today again, most likely you will be approved depending on the amount. And again, the amount, HRA does not have a hard and fast rule. What we've seen currently is that HRA will approve application for $20,000 or less, depending on the situation. For some applications currently, they're also asking the applicants to reduce the amount, especially if it's over $20,000. So what they might ask is that, either your tenant try to pay a couple of months to pay down to a certain amount and HRA will approve the remaining balance, or that you can also seek charities such as University Settlement and other organizations here to help you bring down the rental arrear amount. Some factors that HRA will review when you apply for one-shot deal is your documentation. They definitely need to see documentation, your current income, and they want to make sure that you have future ability to pay your ongoing rent. And they will look at the reason why you fell behind. Right now, we're also seeing HRA requesting tenants to provide a written explanation of why they fell behind on rent. And like I said, very important is that they need to see that you have future ability to pay rent moving forward. Next slide, please. The next myth: I owe over $30,000 in rent and do not have a plan to pay it, but there is a program that will help me. Next slide. So again, just like what I just mentioned, $30,000 is a lot of money for HRA to cover. So usually HRA will require the tenant to reduce the arrears through either charities, contribution from friends or family, and then HRA will be able to pay the remainder amount. Prior to that, ERAP was able to help tenants pay down some of the arrears, and tenants have been getting one-shot deal to resolve their housing issue. But right now, whether ERAP portal will be open or there's more money or another form of ERAP for an NYCHA tenant, it's still to be determined. But tenants should constantly seek information from local nonprofit or in the news or from their elected official office to see whether this information will change in the near future. Next slide, please. My rent is too expensive and I cannot afford to pay the full rent, so I don't have to pay anything. We see this very often. A tenant will come in our office saying, I owe too much rent, I just don't want to pay, especially if I might be evicted. Even if you cannot pay the full rent, you should at least try to make partial payment. When the landlord brings a case to housing court for the arrear, and if there is an awarded money judgment against the tenant, it stays on your record for 20 years. The eviction or money judgment does not appear on the credit report, but the money judgment will appear in your public record, which will impact your ability to find future housing. Also, if there, as a good faith effort, you should work with your landlord paying something. And it also helps in your one-shot deal application to show that you are making an effort to pay down your arrears. Another really important factor is that, especially if you're a NYCHA tenant and there is sudden change of household income, or somebody moved out, or you recently lost a job, while that period of pending your rent adjustment, you should pay whatever you can. Because once NYCHA adjusts it, you might end up having a credit or a zero balance. But if you don't pay anything, it's going to snowball and you're going to end up with a much bigger issue down the road. And for tenants who are living in affordable housing already, there's already a shortage. If you lose this housing, it's going to be very, very challenging to find a comparable apartment with similar rent or lower rent than what you're paying. Next slide. So now I'm going to pass it to Kristie from Brooklyn Legal Aid to talk about some of the legal issues.
Hi, everybody again. The myth I'm dealing with is I have children, am sick, have a disability, am a senior, and or have lived in my apartment for over 10 years, so I cannot be evicted. Next slide. So reality is that's not true. Unfortunately, the landlord can evict anyone in New York who owes rent to the landlord for cause in a rent stabilized or subsidized housing, or for no reason at all in an unregulated apartment. If there is a meritorious basis for an eviction and the tenant is unable to assert a defense to get the case dismissed, then the landlord can evict the tenant regardless of whether they have children, if they're sick, have a disability, are a senior, and or live in their apartment for over 10 years. So unfortunately, that myth or understanding that because you are fit within some criteria, you can't be evicted is absolutely not true. Next slide. So the COVID-19 eviction moratorium is still in effect, so I cannot be evicted if I experience a hardship due to the pandemic. Again, that is not true. The New York's COVID-19 Emergency Eviction and Foreclosure Prevention Act of 2020 actually expired January 15th of 2022. CESPA, as it's also called, the purpose was to protect New York tenants affected by a financial or medical hardship caused by COVID-19 for the threat of an immediate eviction. The CESPA provided for a stay or a pause in an eviction proceeding in which the tenant filed a hardship declaration with the court. As CESPA is now expired, a tenant's hardship declaration will not prevent an eviction from going forward in the normal course. You can still file a hardship declaration and you can still raise it as a defense in a non-payment proceeding, but it is not going to prevent the eviction. Next slide. If I have to move, I am entitled to a payout or a buyout. That, again, is not true. In no way is a landlord legally obligated to pay out a tenant in order for them to move. A landlord will sometimes offer tenants buyouts if it makes sense for a business perspective. If you go to trial, the judge, however, will not require the landlord to give you any money. If you owe money, instead, the judge will enter a money judgment against you for use in occupancy that was accrued during the case. So once the case was filed to the date of trial, the judge could enter a money judgment against you. So examples of when the landlord may want to offer a buyout is that the landlord has a meritorious basis for eviction, but believes it will cost less to buy out the tenant than to endure a drawn out eviction proceeding. So if you have valid defenses that may cause the eviction proceeding to last longer than the general course of like 2-3 months, they may be willing to give you some money in order to expedite you moving from the apartment. Next slide. Money judgments relating to rent owed are not enforceable. Unfortunately, they are enforceable. Money can be garnished from one's wages depending on the amount they earn. So if you earn more than $450 a week, they can garnish your wages. And then a levy can be placed on your bank account or saving account, depending on the amount in the account. A levy cannot be placed if one has less than 3,000 total in their account. A levy prevents one from withdrawing money from their account, which in essence freezes your account. Also, a lien can be placed on a property that someone owns, such as land or a vehicle, depending on the value of the vehicle. A lien allows the creditor to collect the proceeds of the sale from those items. So when you actually are in the process of selling it, the lien will pop up, and then you would have to make the payments and satisfy the money judgment that was issued against you. However, the following forms of income are considered exempt: Social Security retirement, Social Security income, Social Security disability, public assistance, child support, and 90% of your income earned within the last 60 days. Unemployment benefits, veteran benefits, disability benefits, workers' comp benefits, alimony, railroad retirement benefits, and black lung benefits, and as well as your pension. So these forms of income, they cannot garnish. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Cypress Hills, Rene, Arlain, who is the division's director of housing and counseling. Housing counseling.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Rene Arlain. As Kristie said, I am the Director of Housing Counseling, and the Cypress Hills Local Government Corporation is a not-for-profit private corporation, settlement house, and a HUD-approved housing counseling agency that has been was founded since 1983. Provides a range of services from childcare to community development, to, of course, housing counseling, programs for schools, students, and so on. So in terms of the first myth, building that I live in is being foreclosed on, so I do not have to pay my rent. The response to that is that a receiver could be appointed by the court in a mortgage foreclosure action who's entitled to collect rents accruing after the receiver's appointment. Moreover, a receiver may bring eviction proceedings against tenants if the receiver is specifically authorized to do so by an order of the appointing court. I just wanted to add a couple of quick notes that the foreclosure action is an action that really, strictly speaking, involves the borrower, the person who owns the mortgage debt, and the lender who owns, I should say, the person who owes the mortgage debt and the mortgagee, the entity that owns the debt. It's strictly between those entities rather than the tenants who happen to be living in that property. And so if, for example, the tenant is receiving services like in the middle of the winter, heat, hot water, the owner is responsive in terms of, a leak or something happens, legally, the tenant is supposed to be paying the rent. They can choose not to pay the rent. However, even though the owner / borrower, mortgager is being sued for failing to pay their mortgage payments, they could still bring a non-payment action, especially in unregulated housing. They could bring a non-payment action. They could bring a holdover petition, which is, a proceeding leading to an eviction. So there's a choice, but there are certain risks involved in, whether you withhold the rent or if you continue paying the rent. Next slide, please. There's a new owner of my building and I do not know them, so I do not have to pay rent. That's one of those myths, one of those untruths that circulate. And the response is that, or reality is that typically a tenant is obligated to pay rent to the new owner. This is because the transfer of the deed conveys the tenant's interest in the lease to the new owner unless the interest is specifically reserved by the old property owner. In addition, the new owner may be able to collect any back rent the tenant may owe to the former owner of the property if such past due rent is specifically assigned to the new property owner. You can find proof of a transfer of ownership, such as the deed, on ACRIS, the city's website, the Department of Finance's website, that kind of keeps a record digitally available for folks to look at transactions related to real property and transfers of real properties, whether it's mortgages, deeds, etc. Next slide, please. Myth, I have a lot of utility arrears, light bills, gas bills, but it's okay because I do not need to pay. And the reality is, let me just say quickly that yes, you generally have to pay for your use of and consumption of, gas service, electricity service. But in addition, under phase 2 of New York State electric and gas bill relief program, residential customers who did not receive a phase 1 bill credit will have their unpaid service balances through May 1st, 2022, forgiven through a bill credit of up to $2,750 for the gas bill and $4,750 for the Con Ed bill or Con Ed customers. Phase 2 of the bill was ordered by the New York State Public Service Commission on January 19th, 2023, and will automatically provide credits on eligible customers' accounts through April 19th, 2023, and clear the timeframes for these credits have expired so far. Service will not be disconnected for non-payment while a customer's bill credit is being processed. Otherwise, a tenant's utilities may be shut off for non-payment if the utility company sent a termination notice at least 15 days before. In most cases, the utility company cannot make the tenant pay everything that's owed to avoid being shut off or to get the service turned back on. A tenant can enter into a deferred payment plan with their utility company to keep their utilities from being shut off. In addition, a tenant can apply to Human Resources Administration, Department of Social Services for a one-shot deal to help cover the utility arrears. Next, please. Another myth, it is illegal for my landlord, for the property owner to raise my rent with each renewal lease. Reality, tenant resides in an unregulated apartment. The owner can raise their rent at each renewal lease to whatever the landlord wishes. However, owners must provide tenants with written notice if they intend to raise the rent by at least 5%. So even, let me just add that even if the tenant does not have a written lease, there's an oral agreement, what we refer to as, and it's legally binding, a month-to-month lease. Every, you pay your rent at the beginning of the month, then you're good for 30 days, etc. So under those circumstances, if an owner in an unregulated building has less than 6 apartments, decides they want to increase the rent, ideally, theoretically, they should be giving you a 30-day advance notice stating that there's going to be a rent increase in 30 days. And so, the tenant has the option of either complying with that increase or not paying the increase at all, or trying to make partial payments of that rent increase with the hopes or the expectation that the owner will accept the partial payments. Let me continue with the bullets. If a tenant resides in a rent-stabilized apartment, owners of rent-stabilized apartments, the rent increase based on guidelines that are annually established by the New York City Rent Guidelines Board. If a tenant resides in a rent-controlled apartment, the New York State Office of Homes and Community Renewal determines a maximum base rent and a maximum collectible rent for their individual apartment. Adjustments to the maximum base rent are made every 2 years to reflect changes in operating costs. The maximum collectible rent for an apartment cannot be increased by more than 7.5% per year, or the average of the previous 5-year rent guidelines board increases for each year of the 2-year maximum base rent cycles. Exception to that policy or regulation is that if a tenant resides in a rent stabilized or rent controlled apartment and is a recipient of the senior citizens rent increase exemption or a disability rent increase exemption, the tenant's rental portion is frozen. If a tenant resides in public housing or is a recipient of a subsidy, this, like Section 8, the tenant's rent obligation is based on their household income. If the household income increases, their rent obligation will increase proportionately. Next, next slide, please. Thank you very much for your attention. And again, you can certainly call the office if you have a question or would like to get some housing counseling services. Please call the office. The phone number is there at the bottom left corner, 718-647-8100. Our address is 3214 Fulton Street, between Richmond and Chestnut Streets in the Cypress Hills, East New York neighborhood. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all the presenters. I know there was a lot of information included here, but we will be posting the full video of tonight's program on the Brooklyn Aid YouTube channel. And we will send slides to all the attendees here so you can refer back to this material. And if you need services, please see the contact information listed here for each of the co-host organizations participating tonight. We'll leave this slide up as we do the Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can either type them in the chat box at the bottom of your screen, or you can click the raise hand button on your Zoom window and we can unmute you so you can ask your questions verbally.
Thanks, Kristie. Happy to jump in and help the Q&A. Thank you again to everybody. I see we have a couple hands here. First, we'll just get to a question that was in the chat that we didn't get a chance to answer. This is from Anna Fisher. Can a person who applied for ERAP and landlord received payment be evicted? I think meaning if their landlord received that payment, and for ERAP applicant, can the person be evicted? Kristie, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so ERAP allows for a 12-month stay, so they cannot be evicted for 12 months in a holdover proceeding. However, the landlord can start a non-payment case if ERAP doesn't satisfy all the arrears and there's current arrears, so they can get evicted in a non-pay, but not in a holdover. Also, the rent is frozen for 12 months as well.
Thank you. I'm seeing Stephanie Octavius's hand raised. Stephanie, I'm going to unmute you. Can you hear me? Stephanie? Oh, looks like
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I actually have tried to get a one-shot deal. I actually applied for ERAP. I got it, but there was a bit of a discrepancy with what I received. So after trying to apply for a one-shot deal, I was denied because they said that I didn't meet the requirements. I think it was for like, if you are working, there's a certain threshold. I'm still kind of confused about that in trying to apply. Even now, I've applied maybe 3 or 4 times because I'm trying to handle one of the case that I have, which I owe approximately $5,000. I went to housing court only to be found out that my case was dismissed. And I'm a little confused about that because even when I went to court, they didn't know why my case was dismissed because the amount is still owed. So I was on 2 fronts. I was trying to figure out how can I apply for a one-shot deal appropriately so I can pay over the back rent, and if I can get legal counseling for that as well, if I should.
So in regards to your case being dismissed, it's potentially because the petition was satisfied. So if they sued for like August to May, and you actually paid that before the case was actually on the calendar, then it's satisfied and then the case is dismissed regardless if you actually still owe money. But I think if we could have one of the partners talk about the eligibility criteria for one-shot deal. Maybe Nicole or Aleicia.
Sure. I mean, like it said in the presentation, they do keep the eligibility criteria sort of under wraps as to not like stop people from applying. It is a case-by-case basis. So usually if you are denied, they'll send you a letter or some information about the denial. And in your case, it might just be that you're over income for the services, because they, from their calculations, that it looked like you could be making those payments and you could catch up.
Also,
Okay.
you want to make sure that you have future ability. So you want to be able to ensure that you can afford the rent going forward.
Yeah, and like they said on the name is sort of tricky too. Like you can apply again if you still have that $5,000 hanging there. You can apply again for that.
And if the landlord starts a new case against you, then you're entitled to an attorney through right to counsel. So on your very first court appearance, you'll be referred to an attorney on that day. If you actually want counsel to assist you, just to help you with the one-shot deal, there are organizations that can help you with just the one-shot deal. You don't actually need a lawyer for that. And I think you can reach out to a number of the folks here today. for that.
Okay. I do remember them giving me information to contact SUS, but for the home-based program, but I wasn't able to get anyone. And I actually, just FYI, I live in Manhattan, so I live in Midtown. So it's kind of a little tricky here when it comes to getting rental assistance. And trust me, I've tried for years. So that's what I wanted to figure out, what would be the appropriate measures.
Yeah, so if you want a referral to the local home base program for you, there's one that covers all of Manhattan, and you can just call 311 and ask, give them your zip code, and they'll send you to the right one.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Stephanie, thank you, Nicole and Kristie. All right, I see Evelyn Pugh. I see you with your hand raised. I'm gonna unmute you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, go ahead.
Okay, my question is, if you apply for an ERAP before the deadline, but you haven't heard anything from them, would they still look at your case? Or
Yes.
yes, they will? Okay. And my other question real quick is for the one-shot deal. It said that SSI do not have to make repayments. Is that with SSD as well? Or
Yes.
just SSI?
No, it's both.
It's
Like
both?
Social Security Administration benefits.
Oh, so it's considered the same. Okay. And it was another presenter said that a program was running out of money. I didn't hear the name of the program. I don't know, would they remember what program that was running out of money?
Was it ERAP?
Yes.
It might have been ERAP.
Oh, ERAP. Okay then. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Evelyn. All right. I see Pamela Dongo. I'm gonna unmute you here. Can you hear me? Oh, it looks like you're muted. Pamela, if you're still there, you can go ahead and ask your question if you're able to unmute yourself. Not yet. All right, we will move on. See Rhonda Peacock.
Oh,
Oh,
hello.
sorry. Oh, here's Pamela. Sorry, Rhonda. We'll let
Yes.
Pamela go. Go ahead,
Yes.
Pamela.
Good evening. I received a 14-day notice. I have not had any other contact with my management, nor do I have a legitimate number to reach who's actually owner of these apartments. But the last time this happened, I took it to a HACA program, and the monies were paid to cover until February 2021. I was hoping to resolve the conditions that I was living under so that I could start paying my rent. As a person over 60, I've never had rent in arrears, but I also have never been a victim of identity theft or rental fraud because I was being harassed with toxic fumes coming into my unit, and everything let me know that they didn't want me on the premises. So I started trying to relocate. I sought counsel with a pastor, and they told me, don't pay the rent, they'll put you out. So I said, I never not pay my rent, but okay. Nevertheless, the conditions never changed. They got paid the one-shot deal, and that was February 2021 when that was supposed to be sufficient, and I wanted to start paying my rent. But they continued the harassment. They continued the fumes. They try to categorize me as mentally impaired, all kind of things. But my conclusion is I've got another 14-day notice, no phone numbers, not from anyone legal, just stuck in my door. They said I'm in arrears for $20,000. My program affiliated, HACA, has been paying their share. My share for a whole year would only be $3,000. And what I want to know is, being affiliated with HACA, Catholic Charities said that they couldn't assist me, even though they called me twice in regard to a place, but it appears that when I tried to comply and go to them, they changed their mind and said they have nothing to do because I'm affiliated with HACA, but HACA won't help me relocate. But my rent is being paid as per my announcement on my monthly food stamp and rent that goes directly to owner, but it doesn't appear to be helping me in this apartment that I believe is not even registered in my name. So should there be a 14-day notice that I should be complying with since the conditions are not changing?
Did you receive a 14-day notice, or are you expecting a 14-day notice?
No, I got a 14-day notice a couple of weeks ago. No name, no number, no date on it. And it said they got no rent from January to April, along with the rents that I know I haven't paid. But what I'm saying is HACA pays directly to whoever and is saying that they've been getting paid their share from the city, from HRA, but my $270, I have not paid because I can't cook in the location. I don't have no stove. And I've sought the proper authorities to resolve this, but these appear to be people with friends in high places that won't even acknowledge that my condition is as it is. And not to sound like it's organized, but it appears to be. Is there any way to get out of this? All I want is, I'm 64.
So yeah,
I want someplace to live peacefully.
so
but
you can do two things. The 14-day notice is just a predicate notice. That just means that you're going to get a notice of petition and petition from the landlord, and then you'll go to court. In regards,
but who gives the 14-day notice? The owner of the premise or a marshal?
correct. No, the owner.
Oh, the owner gives the 14-day notice, so it doesn't got to be signed, dated, stamped, or nothing. They just can give you that.
Correct.
Of their own.
Correct.
Okay.
And then you can file an HP on the second floor of the courthouse. An HP is for repairs, or you can wait until they start the non-payment case. You will be assigned counsel if you're income eligible, and they can assist you in getting potentially an abatement, which means a reduction of what you owe, just your portion, not what Haas is paying. Get it reduced and then get a credit based on the fact that you've been living in these conditions. And then they have to make the repairs. And so you would enter a
Well, I tell
stipulation
you,
basically saying that. Mhm.
I'll tell you the honest truth. I called 311 and someone with a badge, with no name, no proper identification or anything came. I said, do you have a name? Do you have a picture ID, something? What I'm trying to establish, I want you to understand, it appears that these people got friends in high places and there's a lot of fraudulent activity and no one would acknowledge the actual conditions. And one said I wouldn't let them into the unit to check the stove that I haven't had for 2 years. But even when I had a stove, I couldn't cook and leave anything in that place because the maintenance people could come in daily. And my home is destroyed. I moved in with living room furniture, kitchen, bedroom furniture. Everything has been destroyed. I just want to leave here, forget these people, and live in peace. I don't know what's
Pamela,
going on.
I would suggest that you reach out to us by email at info@bka.org, because I don't want you to give so much information. Like there's a lot of people listening and it sounds like very personal. Yeah, personal info.
Okay, I
So
appreciate your time and expertise.
No problem. You can
I've
shoot
been
us an
pretty-
email or you can give us a call. Just say that you were part of this webinar today, and then they
Which
will
number
direct you.
is that I should call someone on?
718.
The top left
Yes.
of your screen right now, if you're seeing
Yep,
it.
718-487-2300. And you can ask for Kristie and say you were part of this webinar. Okay.
Ask
We'll
for
talk.
Christine?
Yep.
I appreciate your time and expertise, and I'm sorry for utilizing so much time.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're 100% fine. I just want to protect your privacy.
Oh, God bless you all. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Pamela. So sorry to hear about what you're going through, but yeah, absolutely contact us and we should be able to help you. We have time for a couple more questions. Like Kristie said, if if we don't get a chance to answer everybody here, we have so many great organizations on tonight, so you can contact any of these numbers here. We should be able to help you or at least refer you to an organization that can handle your situation. Rhonda, are you still there with us?
Yes.
Hi there. Go ahead.
I'm disabled and I went for a one-shot deal. I went in January, I went in February. They kept saying they're gonna send somebody to my house because they're supposed to come to my house. I still have not received anything. And the numbers, when you try to call them, the numbers, you can't get through to none of them numbers. It's like make-believe numbers. What should I do?
Go ahead, Kristie.
I can actually get you the number direct to the housing, to the unit that actually goes to the apartment. Would you be able to put your email in the chat and then I can shoot you an email with the phone number you should call?
Yes, my love.
Okay.
I appreciate you. Have a blessed one.
You too.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Yeah, you can type it right in the chat. And if we get wires crossed at all, or you aren't able to follow up, you can always, again, contact us 718-487-2300 or email the info@bka.org. I see Evelyn, I know you spoke earlier. It looks like your hand is still up. Did you have another question? No? Okay.
No, I didn't have one. Let me see if I could take it down. Thank you.
No, it's okay. No worries. We did have one last question from the chat during the presentation that Nicole answered. Nicole, you want to just, so everybody can know the answer to this one. It was asked, what is considered a housing risk that you discussed in your slides?
Sure. So this is for any of those subsidies. When I talked about the eligibility requirements for them, the difference between a housing risk and imminent eviction. So unless you're part of a special group, like a veteran or those specific people that are being diverted away from the shelter. If you're just looking for a subsidy, looking for some assistance, most likely you need to be fully in housing court or having been through a housing court eviction within the last year. So that's what counts as being at imminent risk of eviction. So if a landlord, like you mentioned, the 14-day notice is the beginning, but a lot of times landlords will just write a letter and get it notarized, saying you haven't paid X number of months of rent, or I want you to leave because my family's moving in. And that unfortunately doesn't count, even if it's notarized for a subsidy. It needs to be full housing court or housing court within the last year.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicole.
No problem.
Pamela, I'm also seeing your hand is still up. Just making sure you don't have an additional question. I know we'll be following up with you.
No, I just wanted to know the address to your office because my phone is actually hacked, and since you did tell me to be mindful that,
Yeah.
that has been my problem with reaching out and actually speaking to someone with the ability to assist me. Is there an office that I can come to?
Yes, Brooklyn A has 2 offices, one in
Where is
Bed-Stuy.
Kristie, the one that said she would assist me?
So it's 1471 Fulton Street,
1471 Fulton Street.
and that's Brooklyn, New York, 11216.
And what is that between?
It's, if you take the C train, it's Kingston and True.
Okay, 1471 Fulton Street between Kingston and True. Okay, all of you have been wonderful. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Pamela. All right, and thank you, everybody, all of our panelists. Thank you so much to our elected official sponsors for sponsoring this event, helping promote it, and for all the incredible work that you do. Again, thank you so much to all of our presenters and all of our co-host groups here. We're so glad that we could get this program put together, and I think this is going to be a really valuable resource even moving forward. We'll have the entire program on the Brooklyn A YouTube channel, and we will be sending the slides out to you if you attended tonight. And also thank you to Carlo for your interpretation. And yeah, everyone have a lovely evening. Thanks again.
Bye, everybody.